Well, good morning. Welcome back to church. I'm glad that you came back again, even after last week's message on being rich. But we are in a series called Be Rich, where we are going to work on being rich and how to be rich as believers. And I tell you what, I felt pretty rich in worship this morning. Didn't you? You enjoy that, man? Whew. I love that, you know what I love is that I think some of you are actually learning how to worship a little bit. So I can't see behind me, but I think we're getting better at it. And we keep working at that. I think we'll do well. But big week this week. Hopefully you've got some stretchy pants that you can wear on Thursday. If you don't, you still have time. So run out, get you some stretchy pants because I highly recommend it for Thursday. But big week. We have so much to be thankful for. Every Sunday, the leaders, the people that are volunteering in our church, if they're helping in children's ministry or greeting or whatever on the band, we have a huddle every Sunday morning, and Cheryl kind of leads that huddle, but she's been asking us every week for the past couple weeks about what we're thankful for. And man, when you start to think about that, and you start to think about all that you have to be thankful for. And we had a district meeting a couple weeks ago, or just this past week, that we had a speaker come in. Mark Bain came in and spoke, and he said one of the things he does, he gets up every morning and just thanks God, just spends some time thanking God in prayer for the things that he had. He thanked God that he had toes. The stuff that we think that we take for granted, that every day you just get up and you think, I've got my toes. You don't think about it, but I'm thankful that I have toes. I'm thankful for so much in my life. I'm thankful for all of you here in this church, but such a huge week when we start thinking about that, and when we really think about it as a country and as Christians in America, we think about this concept of being rich, and we talked about it last week and shared some of that, but but the problem is, most rich Americans really we're just not good at it. We're not good at being rich, and I talked about that last week. But for the next couple of weeks, we are going to practice together, because I think together we can make a difference, and I'm going to talk about some of those things that we can do to make a difference, and you're going to begin to hear about that over the next couple of weeks, of ways that each one of us at Salem Grace can learn to practice to be rich, and I think we have some of those things lined out today I want to share with you at the end of my sermon this morning. But last week, I just want to kind of catch you up if you're here for the first time, or if you didn't make it last week. We talked about the fact that wealth has side effects, and we talked that that because we've probably all met some really strange rich people at some point in time. We've met some people that are just really weird. I don't know if they were born that way or if they got rich and then got weird. But at some point in time, we've met some really strange rich people. But and what's interesting, the side effect, the first side effect is to begin with, most people live in denial. Like as Christians, as Americans, as people, we live in denial. And what's interesting about rich people, and I talked about that last week. Last week I said, the title of my message was "Congratulations, You're Rich," and everybody got really excited because most of you didn't know that you were rich until you came to church last week and realized that you were rich, and so I said congratulations. But everybody was super excited. If you weren't here last week, everybody jumped up, was screaming. Everybody was really excited to find out that they were rich. But the problem with rich people is they won't admit it. Most rich people won't admit that they're rich, and that we live in denial. And tall people will admit they're tall. Short people will admit they're short. Artistic people will admit that they're artistic, and their room's a mess and their car is a mess, and they're super happy about it. Extroverts are really excited to tell you that they're extroverts. Introverts, not so much. But we'll admit different things in our life, but we won't admit the fact that we are rich, and we live in this denial. And the problem is they don't know when it happened to them. We don't know when it happened, but we became rich. And so I love statistics, and we looked at some statistics in related to this message this week. And there was a Gallup poll recently done, and where they asked the average American, how much money would you need to be rich? And the average American actually said $150,000. So rich equals $150,000. If you make $150,000, most people generally across America feel like that you're rich. But then they actually interviewed those who made or earned $30,000 people that had an average income of $30,000, they asked those people what they thought would be rich, and rich equaled 75,000. So you go to the $150,000 people, they're like, oh, whoa, I'm not rich. What do you mean? I'm not I'm not rich. But then you ask the people that's 30,000 that make 30,000 and they think $75,000 rich. But you go to the people that make $75,000 and you're like, well, wait, I'm not rich. I make $75,000, I'm not rich. But here, and this is interesting. I love this. Money Magazine subscribers put a number on it. And the number that they came up with was $5 million. Average America. That if you had $5 million, that's your rich. So that means if you go talk to somebody that has $2 million of liquid assets and say, hey, you're rich, they're like, no. 2.5 million, no. 3.9, not rich. 4 million, not rich. $4.9 million, not rich. 5 million, rich. But I guarantee if you go to the people who have $5 million in liquid assets and talk to them, they would say, what? I'm not rich, right? I'm not rich. So the point is this, that nobody's rich, but everybody knows somebody who is, right? Nobody in here is rich. None of us are rich. And so the problem is we have a hard time admitting that we're rich. And I shared some of that last week. So wealth has side effects. And really, the first one is rich people live in denial. We talked about that. And then rich people, the second side effect I shared was rich people are plagued by discontentment. And I covered that last week a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, the more people have, the more they want, right? The more people have, the more she wants, right? The more people, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but my wife will do this from time to time. I think maybe this morning. But we'll stand and we'll go to our closet and we will stand in front of a closet full of clothes and we will say, I don't have anything to wear, right? We do that. We'll stand in front of a closet. And when in fact, we have work clothes, we have workout clothes, we have after work clothes, we have work in the yard clothes, we have clothes for every occasion, don't we? You have old clothes, workout clothes, you got different kinds of clothes. I shared last week, the fact that I'd heard that some ladies have 6 pairs of shoes or more. How many has more than 6 pairs of shoes? I think I have 6 pairs of shoes. But so we've covered some of that and the fact that being rich is relative, right? It's a moving target. It's all relative to who you are and where you're at in life. And so this letter that Paul wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, it's just we're spending some time on this one verse over the next few weeks. And you're like, man, I can't, that's a lot to get out of one verse. But we're gonna just dissect this verse. And in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, Paul begins to point out some of the greater risks. And verse 17, we'll look at that. We'll start there. But he says, Paul is writing this letter to Timothy, which is kind of his understudy, but he tells Timothy, command those who are rich in this present world, and he could have said anything. This is the one command I'm going to tell you to tell rich people. Command those who are rich, and if you're still sitting here and thinking, well, that's me, I need to back up, because we're all rich. But command those who are rich in this present world. Remember, if you make over $30,000, you're in the top 5% of wealth in the world. Command those who are rich in this present world. He could have said anything at that point, but he says this, not to be arrogant. Isn't that interesting that he chose that word? Have you ever met anyone that's arrogant? Anybody? You ever run into anybody that's super arrogant? You're like, what in the world? And then there's confidence, right? And so I looked up a definition, but arrogance, here's the definition, is being full of yourself, feeling you're always right, and believing your accomplishments or abilities make you better than other people. People often believe arrogance is excessive confidence, but it's really a lack of confidence. Arrogant people are insecure and often repel others. Just a little definition I found. And I don't know, I don't think of myself as arrogant, and you probably don't either. Some of you probably, but it's kind of probably like wealth people. Nobody's arrogant, but we know somebody who is, right? So, relative. And, this is never, I don't know if I was trying to think of an example. When I've met arrogant people in my life, and they just always just repel you, don't they? Like, anytime you meet somebody that's really incredibly arrogant, you're just like, what is their deal? Get over yourself, man. But there's a comedian I like to watch. His name's Brian Regan. He's pretty clean, and he talks about airports. And I don't know if you've ever traveled much, or if you've ever been to the airport, but I've never really ever felt this more than when I walk through first class, getting on an airplane. You ever notice that? Like, you get on the airplane in first class, all the first class people are up there in their giant chairs, and then all of us coach people, hey. And this comedian, I tell you, he's like, bring me the head of, they're up there in these big thrones, bring me the head of a pig, have someone from Coach fiddle for me. But I love, it's like you just think, well, we're making money now. We're just right now. We're back there on our Etch-a-Sketch. Coach. And then what kills me is they pull the curtain on you, like we can't, just shut the curtain. We don't even want to look at them. All those coach people. But there's nothing more arrogant than that, I think. But this is what Paul tells Timothy. Arrogance, I read this quote too this week. I thought this was great. Arrogance requires advertising, but confidence speaks for itself. And Paul is saying in this scripture that when we get rich, our inclination is toward arrogance. Humility is not usually associated with wealth. Entitlement is, isn't it? We don't very rarely. Money has a way of making us feel superior or better than, and it's so deceitful. Money makes people think they're smarter than they are. We think wealth reflects some kind of superiority about us. So in our culture, we have this saying, and this is so true in our culture, that we've come up with this saying, and I guarantee you have said it, or somebody else have said it, or you've heard this saying, and it's this. He's worth a ton of money, but you would never know it. You ever said that? Have you ever heard anybody say that? And why is that? Why do we say that? Because usually when somebody is rich, you know it, don't you? They act it. They travel around and go on vacations, do different things that we do. And I know you're thinking, well, that's not me. I'm not arrogant. I don't travel around and take vacations and buy new cars. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. And we'll get to that in a minute. But Paul tells Timothy, of all the things he tells him, the one piece of advice that Paul gives him in this passage about being rich, is not to be arrogant. Don't be arrogant. And so we think about that. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I read that definition, I'm like, wow. I don't think I'm arrogant. But am I? Do I think I'm better than people? And we would never say that, right? You would never consciously say that. But the way we live our lives and the way we spend our money and the way we handle our finances and the way things that we do and the places we go and do people somewhere look at me and go, look at that guy. Who does he think he is? Are we arrogant? I think it was interesting that he gave Timothy that piece of advice, not to be arrogant. A humble, rich person is refreshingly shocking, isn't it? When you finally meet somebody and you're like, man, that guy's loaded. Are you serious? You ever meet anybody like that? I had the opportunity to work at bank, and there were times people would come into the bank, and I think, well, and then like, wow. It doesn't come across that way. Incredibly generous. Why do we struggle with that? And so here's why we struggle with that, the arrogance. Paul takes us to the root of it. And here's the root of the problem. In verse 17 again, he goes on and says, tell them not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. And so the root of our arrogance comes from the fact that we have let our hope slide into our wealth. And I talked about that last week, how that migrates. It's very subtle. We don't intend for it to happen, but that's the way I have this desk chair in my office. Mark knows, he's laughing because he knows what's up with my desk chair. But if you're ever sitting across from the desk chair and it feels like you're getting taller, you're not. I'm getting shorter. My desk chair leaks, and so when I sit there, like ever so slightly, it's sliding down. Ever so slowly until eventually the desk hits me about right here. I'm like, what in the world? I'll be working and I don't even realize it, and then I'm like typing. Like, what happened? Sometimes it's sudden, sometimes I'll just sit in and it goes, but I was just sitting there talking to Mark the other day and it was just like, see ya. I just have this desk chair that leaks, and I think that's sometimes the way it is with our wealth. With our hope. We see our bank account bigger, and as our bank account grows, and maybe we're get to the point where we've turned the corner, we're paying bills, and we're starting to put a little bit in savings, and then all of a sudden, that hope that we have begins to leak, and it begins to slide ever so gradually toward our money and not toward our provider. And we lose it. Very subtly, very slowly, it leaks. And so Paul says, tell them not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. And this is huge because arrogance begins to transform into hope, and hope is to lean on and to prop yourself up on. When you have, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you have very little, you don't put your hope in what you have. This is why, when you travel, I can remember, and I shared this last week, I've shared this story before, but I can remember when we went to El Salvador, these people had really, by our standards, nothing. I mean, really, they didn't have running water. The water was only on a couple hours a day. We had to flush a bucket with the toilet, flush the toilet with a bucket. That other way would be really weird. Never even seen that happen before. But I have flushed the toilet with a bucket of water, and but they were incredibly generous. I've shared this story. A friend that I met, his name is Miguel, and we were sitting waiting to go to a job, and we had taken a break, and we'd actually gotten ice cream cones, and we were sitting in the van. Miguel was in the front passenger seat licking his ice cream cone, and we're in El Salvador, just sitting there waiting on the side of the street for somebody to come out. We were going to go to another job site, I think. And a guy comes up to the window, he said something, that was my Spanish. It's about how good it is, too. But he said something in Spanish to Miguel in the front row, sitting there, and Miguel's he said, okay, said something back to him, took one more lick of his ice cream cone and handed it out the window and gave the guy his ice cream cone. The guy walked off with his ice cream cone. I was like, what was that? Miguel, what was up with that? I was like, why? What happened there? And I was like, what did he say? And Miguel's like, said he wanted my ice cream cone. It was that simple. He just handed it in his ice cream cone. And I think sometimes we just hold on to stuff. And we're just less generous because we have so much. We're afraid we're going to lose something. We're afraid we're going to miss out on something. We're afraid that because our hope has shifted to our wealth, it makes us bad givers. Makes us less generous. And Solomon, he's probably the richest of rich. This guy had everything. Probably richer than any of you ever will be. Proverbs 18:11 says, "The wealth of the rich is their fortified city." They imagine, in other words, they think it's going to save them. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. So Solomon, who's rich beyond measure, he got it. He understood that rich people, when we're rich, we imagine that our wealth is going to save us from anything that comes down the pike. We imagine that it's a wall too high to scale. We imagine, because it's not reality. It's imagine. I love that he used that word there. The rich begin to imagine that their wealth will save them. And it's why it's so dangerous to lean in that direction. When wealth becomes your hope, you feel compelled to hoard or to build a wall around it, a fortified city, don't we? Anybody remember Y2K? Raise your hand. Okay, you're all old. Some of you that don't remember that, you're way too young. Y2K was, if you're too young, basically what that was when we went from 1999 to the year 2000, people, it was pandalirium. That's a word I made up. It's pandalirium. People were scared to death, right? We're like, okay, the computers can't handle it. It's going to shut the power grid down. We're going to have to live off the land. It freaked people out. Who made? Just put your hand up if you have still rations in your basement from Y2K. Anybody? I know some people. Like, did you at least save water? Like, you put water in jugs. Anybody? Nobody? Okay, well, you guys aren't as good at that. But people did, and I can remember, like, I was at the bank then, and I can remember people coming into the bank, like we had to order more cash from the Federal Reserve because people were taking their cash out of the bank and hoard. In fact, we had one guy came in and took every cent that he had and bought gold and took it home and buried it in the yard or something. I don't know. But it was I just thought of that because people began to put their hope when the thought of, hey, this might all crash. We don't have any power. We don't have anything else, and I got to protect this little nest egg that I've built. We begin to put our hope. When wealth becomes your hope, you feel compelled to hoard. Not. And 1 Timothy 6:17 says, again, not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but put their hope in what? God. Got to be careful that our wealth doesn't become a substitute for God. I'm going to ask you two statements. And I'm just going to ask you a question. I'm going to make a statement, and I'm going to make two statements. And I want you guys to think about which statement freaks you out the most, causes you the most anxiety, the thought of that statement causes you the most anxiety, okay? The first statement is this: there is no God. He doesn't exist, never did. It's all a big made-up thing. When you die, it's over. You'll never see your loved ones again. You're just worm bait. You're nothing. It's the first statement. Second statement is this: you have no money. Zero. You have absolutely nothing. You don't know how you're going to feed your kids. You don't know how you're going to pay the rent. You don't know how you're going to make. You have zero money and no chance of making any more. Which one of those statements gives you the most anxiety to think about happening? And so, let me go on. In case some of you are feeling really good about yourself right now, because you're thinking, well, I choose God, right? Another scenario. Imagine, and this may actually hit really close to home. Somebody may have gotten some notice this week. But imagine you're terminally ill. Imagine you've just gotten notice that you don't have very long to live. And that may hit close to home to some of you. I would just say this. If you know you would put your hope in God at the end of your life, doesn't it make sense that you would put your hope in God in the middle? 1 Timothy 16:17 says, but put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything, surprise, for our enjoyment. Isn't that interesting? He wants us to enjoy things. But if you would put your hope in God at the end of your life, if you were on your deathbed, I guarantee, because we get calls all the time, Pastor Doug has been bedside. Many people this week. Myself, Pastor Mark. We've all been with those people. When it comes down to the end of your life, what matters the most is where you're going to put your hope in. Are you going to put your hope in your bank account, or are you going to put your hope in God? So if you would put your hope in at the end of your life, doesn't it make sense that we would put our hope in God right now while we're in the middle of it? Makes sense to me. So let's talk about that. Put your hope in God who richly provides us with everything. Surprise, it's for our enjoyment. So what he's saying here is like, hey, God has richly blessed us. He has richly blessed each one of us for our enjoyment. He provides everything for us for our enjoyment. So go ahead, remodel the house, get your iPhone, trade in your car, do those things, but don't let that be where your hope lies. Don't let that slide from your hope being in God. And if everything was gone today, where was your hope lie? Don't put your hope in it, but to put their hope in God who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Christians believe, and this is interesting, you could ask any Christian, they believe that God is the provider of everything, every good thing, don't we? We all believe that. We believe that God is the provider of everything good in our life. So why put your hope, and this is another thing, you might want to write this down. Again, better chance of going to heaven if you take notes in church. Why put your hope in riches when you can put your hope in the one who richly provides? Where does your hope lie this morning? Why put your hope in the provisions when you can put your hope in the provider? Why would we hope in what he provides and not hope in the person who actually has provided it? He provides us something, we go, thanks, I'm going to put my hope in that. No, I'm going to put my hope in him who provided it to me in the first place. That's where my hope lies. So why hope in riches when you can hope in the one that richly provides? I want to do a little exercise. And I know everybody hates this, but we're going to do it anyway. I don't really care. Everybody hates this when pastors do this. I remember I used to say, I was like, are you serious? Yeah, we're going to do it. I want you to repeat this. Put it up on the screen, Kathy. I will not place my hope in riches, but in him who richly provides. Okay, ready? I will not place my hope in riches, but in him who richly provides. Okay, now let's do it different. Like, I want you to put a little attitude in it. It's like, I will not place my hope in riches. Are you serious? Okay, we got to say it like that. I will not put my hope in riches. Like, who would do that, right? But in him who richly provides. That's where our hope needs to be. I'm going to ask the band to come up. So to summarize, there's three things I want you to walk away from here this morning. Don't be arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth. And put your hope in God, the one who richly provides us with everything we need. Let our hope be there. And I think the important thing about this message, this will just fall flat unless each one of us step out of here and are honest with ourselves and say, man, have I been arrogant in the way I've been handling my finances? Did I come across that way? Have I been placing my hope? Does it give me more anxiety to think about losing everything versus the fact that there may not be a God? Which one of those gives you most anxiety? Think about that this week. So, part of this message series is we want, I told you we were going to practice. And we're going to practice being rich. And we're rich in good deeds, right? We're rich in the things. We're rich in how we carry ourselves and what we're able to do with each other. And so I want to challenge you this week. This morning, before you leave here, you guys can stand up. I'm going to get ready to let you. Everybody loves when pastors say that. We're like, okay, about done. We have an opportunity over the holiday season and over the next few weeks at Salem Grace. Each one of you do. And the question is, are we going to behave like good rich people? You know? How can we behave like good rich people? And we have to practice it because we know we're terrible at it, right? We're not good at it. Some of us are better than others. I'll give you that. But by and large, by what we've been blessed with, by comparison to everybody in this world, we're not good at it. So we're going to practice. So how can we behave like good rich people? And I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can do that. These are just 3 small ways. And there may be something else outside of this, but we're just going to highlight these 3. And because it's easy, right? You can do it before you leave church. We have a candy cane project. Every year we do that. We take care of, we provide kids with coats and basic necessities that in our community, right here in Salem, that need things. It's not just about giving kids a bunch of toys at Christmas. I mean, they get underwear and socks, and they do get some toys, but underwear, socks, coats, things that they need. And it's a great thing that that really evolved out of a grow group of people saying, hey, we need to do something. And so this morning, we have 78 sponsors. 78 people have stepped up and said, hey, I'll sponsor a kid. We still need 75 more people to step up and say, hey, I'll take a kid. I'll do something. I'll be rich. I'll be good at being rich. That's opportunity number 1. If that interests you, see Stacy Russell at the back table. Got a question table. Second thing we can do. I don't know if you're aware of this, but our church has a food pantry that once a month we give groceries to people once a month, every month here. Alberta Lewis leads that ministry. She does a fantastic job. She can buy a sack full of groceries for $1.20. I kid you not. I don't know how she does it. She stacks those. But the thing I love about Alberta is she's always wanting to put more in the sack. She's like, hey, if we could get more, if we could do more, especially around this time. So we're partnering with Save-A-Lot, actually, in our food pantry. And if you go to, I think of a picture of that. If you go to Save-A-Lot, for $6, they will fill a grocery sack of food. And that's actually what's already there. But for $6, Save-A-Lot is donating these bags to our December food pantry. They're going to donate those to our food pantry ministry here at Salem Grace Church Nazarene, that we can fill these people's grocery sacks full. Maybe actually put a ham in there. Wouldn't that be awesome? So for $6, if you go to Save-A-Lot, spend $6 for the price of a McDonald's value meal, you can fill a sack of groceries that we'll be able to actually donate to somebody in December. Okay? Point number 2. Third way that you can be rich this week, and you can practice to be rich. We have a rake and run. Mark talked about it. You know, it's not, maybe you're at a point where you're saying, hey, you know what, I can't financially give. $6 may not be a lot to you, Trent, but you're rich. And $6 is a lot for me, and I understand that. That's totally fine. Rake and run. We can serve. You can run a rake. If you can run a rake, show up here today, and let's go out and just serve our community. Nothing, I'm always looking for ways that we can get outside of these walls into Salem and say, hey, we're from Grace Church of Nazarene. We're just here because we love you, because Jesus loved us, and we love you. So grab a rake, show up here at 1 o'clock. If you can rake a yard and run in and out, rake a yard, maybe you can only do one, and that's cool. But those are ways that we can practice to be rich. I'm going to challenge you that this morning to get involved somewhere. And maybe you think of something else that's outside of the three things that I just shared. You don't have to do those three. Find a way to be rich this week. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you so much. Thank you for your grace and your love and your forgiveness. Thank you for what your word teaches us, not to be arrogant. Help us not to be arrogant in our wealth, Lord, and what you have blessed us with. Help us to be generous givers and to be generous with the blessings that you have richly blessed us with. Help us always, 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 always to keep our hope centered in you and not what we have in our bank account and not what we have in our houses or cars or anything else that we've amassed for ourselves here, but Lord, but we recognize that every perfect gift comes from you and that we are going to place our hope in you this morning, Jesus. Help us to be a kind of church that does that through these next few months and throughout the rest of the next year, Lord. Help us always to be rich in our blessings with you and be rich in our relationship with you. Take us from this place, and thank you for your presence here this morning. In your precious holy